Hi, welcome to I Love the Library. I'm Mary Haney, Director of the Library. Today we have a very special treat for you. Two winners of the Legend of Polar Pete writing contest. Our first winner is Stella Foltz. She's a 6th grader at Holy Rosary School in Detroit Lakes, and she won first prize for the middle school level.
The Legend of Polar Pete. May 30th, 1989. Polar Pete is born in the North Pole, right next to Santa's house. You should have seen the look on his proud parents, Polar Clem and Catherine. The first 6 months of his life were normal. Cry when you're hungry and cry when you're tired. But that all changed when he was about 7 months old. A reporter, Carl McKenzie, from New York, came to take pictures for his successful magazine, National Geographic. He told the polar bears all about himself. You see, he thought polar bears wouldn't understand him, but boy was he wrong. Polar bears can hear, talk, and write almost twice as well as humans. He's snapping away with the camera, telling the polar bears to go to the left, and then to go to the right. Little did he know that polar bears didn't care to be in magazines. But Polar Pete liked getting pictures taken. He was over there just loving pictures. But all the other polar bears had to put up with the pictures for 3 weeks. Not just 3 weeks, but 3 weeks of getting pictures taken while you're sleeping, while hunting, and eating. When Carl finally left, the polar bears threw a party. For the party they even had white seal, the hardest seal to hunt, but boy was it worth it. Once Carl left, things were back to normal. They were playing ice hockey with frozen fish, winner gets to fish. They were suntanning on the cold ice, hunting, eating, and sleeping. It was all that really went on there. One day, when Polar Pete was only 13, he decided it was too boring for him. He gathered some of his friends, Polar Mike, Polar Dave, Polar Tom, Polar Frank, Polar Ken, Polar Al, and Polar Jim. They started a band. Now it took quite some time to agree on the name, but it ended up being the Polar Explosions. Once the friendships grew, they stopped calling each other Polar. They just called each other by their first names. All but Polar Pete. They never stopped calling him Polar Pete. I guess you could say Polar Pete was a little different. Everyone had a special place in the band. They had the backup singers, Mike, Al, and Frank. Guitar players were Ken and Polar Pete. Polar Pete would have loved to sing, but you see, poor Polar Pete never learned how to talk. We also had the main singer, Dave. The one and only big best band manager was Jim. The Polar Explosions became pretty popular to the animals around town. They had been playing around town for about a month when they decided it was time to go on tour. To go on tour, you need something to get around, like a band bus. Where were these guys supposed to find a band bus? The only one they had seen lately was on the bottom of the lake. They went underwater and pulled up the bus. Luck would have it, it worked. It went 20 miles per hour, which was slow. They went on tour in all the cold places of Alaska, Antarctica, Montana, and Maine. Their last stop was Minnesota. The animals there went crazy for the Polar Explosions. By the time they got to Minnesota, they were all about 14 years of age. They decided it was time for them to retire. They worked it out that Jim got to keep the bus. The rest would either go back to the North Pole with Jim or start a new life in Minnesota. After their farewell concert, everyone but Polar Pete went back to the North Pole. Polar Pete was fascinated with Minnesota, so he started his new life there. At first, he had no idea where he was going, what he was going to do, or where he was going to live. He just walked around until he found a cute little town called Detroit Lakes. He decided this was his new home, because he just adored their big, cold lakes full of fish. One day, he dug a hole in the ice, jumped in, and went fishing. He caught a total of 3 small fish. He was still starving. When he came up, he could smell lots of people and food. He looked over across the lake and saw people jumping in the cold lake. As far as he knew, people jumped in warm water, not a frozen lake. They all had hot dogs and chips and everything yummy. He smelt it, and hunger drove him to run over to the people. As he got closer, kids started yelling, "Polar bear, polar bear." Adults were saying, "We have a mascot?" Everyone was so excited, and so was Polar Pete. The people of the town who were there decided to make him mascot for Polar Fest. They said he was perfect for the Polar Fest t-shirt. They even made pins of him. He was so happy. If you ever go to Polar Fest, know that Polar Pete would be happy to give you a hug, a friendly wave, or even an autograph. I mean, he wasn't a famous band. So stop by Polar Fest and see Polar Pete.
Thanks for watching I Love the Library. Be sure to tune in next week when we'll have the winner of the adult category for the writing contest. Bye.